lo veía siempre, sé que es mi padre, que estaba ahí, me está gritando, pero es mi entrenador.
He wasn't just a fighter. He was Puerto Rico's warrior. Felix Tito Trinidad stepped into the ring 45 times and left opponents broken in his wake. From the roar of San Juan to the lights of Madison Square Garden, every punch he threw carried the weight of a nation. But at 53, Tito isn't talking about the titles. He's talking about one man, one fight, one night that still haunts his dreams. Who was he? And what happened in that ring? Hopkins versus Trinidad, the fight that changed everything. By the time Felix Trinidad stepped into Madison Square Garden on the night of September 29, 2001, he wasn't just fighting for another belt. He was walking in with the weight of a nation and the confidence of an unbeaten star. The event was billed as, "And then there was one," a tagline meant to crown the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Trinidad had already conquered the welterweight and light middleweight divisions. Now, just one opponent stood in the way of total dominance. That opponent was Bernard Hopkins, a man who doesn't give up easily. However, Hopkins wasn't expected to win. Many saw him as the final hurdle in Tito's unstoppable run. After all, Tito had dismantled William Joppy in 5 rounds just months earlier. But Hopkins wasn't there by luck. He was a fighter with something real to defend. While the world leaned toward Trinidad, Hopkins stayed calm, convinced he was the only one who had solved the puzzle. Tensions were already high before the first punch was thrown. During the promotional tour, Hopkins caused outrage when he threw the Puerto Rican flag to the ground at an event in San Juan. The crowd exploded in anger, and police had to escort him out for his safety. That moment didn't just stir the crowd, it changed everything. For Tito, it wasn't just disrespect, it was an insult to his country, his people, and everything he represented. The fight was no longer about belts or rankings. It was personal now. For Tito, it was a matter of Puerto Rican pride versus open disrespect. From that moment on, the fight changed into something personal: national pride, wounded honor, and a champion fighting not just for himself, but for an island that believed in him. From the opening bell, it was clear this fight would not go the way most expected. Hopkins did not rush in. He stuck to his game plan, circling, controlling distance, and targeting the body with sharp jabs. He slipped Tito's left hook and made him reset. The pace slowed. Hopkins controlled the tempo and kept Tito off balance. For the first time in years, Tito was not dictating the fight. He was trying to catch up. As the rounds went on, the difference in styles became clearer. Trinidad, known for breaking opponents down with constant pressure and power shots, was missing more than landing. His combinations, usually sharp and accurate, were off the mark. Hopkins stayed composed. He wasn't throwing many punches, but the ones he landed counted. Every jab had a purpose. Every counter made Tito think twice. This wasn't a brawl. It was a controlled breakdown. Hopkins was picking him apart, piece by piece. By the halfway point, the momentum had shifted. The Puerto Rican chants that once filled Madison Square Garden started to fade. Hopkins was no longer just holding his ground. He was taking control. He began pressing forward, cutting off the ring, and forcing Tito backward. The space Tito relied on to launch his offense was gone. Round by round, he was pulled into unfamiliar territory. Power was no longer enough. Tito's corner grew tense. His father, watching closely, kept calling for the left hook, the punch that had carried them through so many battles. But he couldn't land it because Hopkins had taken it away. Every time Tito opened up, he was met with sharp counters and smart footwork that kept him off balance. He couldn't find his rhythm. There was no time to adjust. no space to reset. Hopkins was fighting on his terms. By the time they got to the 12th round, Tito was exhausted but still pushing forward, looking for one last opening. He tried to rally, but Hopkins was ready. He timed a clean right hand that rocked Tito, then followed up with a hard combination. Trinidad staggered. His father didn't wait. He stepped in and threw in the towel. The referee waved it off. The fight was over. It was the first time Tito had ever been stopped. Not outpointed, not edged out on a scorecard. Stopped, physically and psychologically. The air inside Madison Square Garden changed. The undefeated fighter who had become a national hero was no longer invincible. He was human. And that realization hit as hard as any punch. Even now, people still talk about that night. Not just because Trinidad lost, but because something changed. Hopkins found a weakness and used it. He didn't win by force. He won by being smart. Step by step, he took control. He didn't just beat a champion, he showed the world how to beat him. That loss stayed with Tito. It reminded him that power alone is not enough. To stay at the top, a fighter needs more. He needs timing, patience, and a deep understanding of the ring. Less than a year later, in 2002, he stepped away from boxing for the first time, marking his first retirement. Although he later came back briefly in 2004. To understand why that night cut so deep, you have to know what came before. Long before Madison Square Garden, before the flag hit the floor, before the silence of defeat. Tito wasn't just a fighter, he was Puerto Rico's pride. And to see how much he lost that night, we need to look at how much he built, how he rose, how he became unstoppable. When Tito became the IBF welterweight champion in 1993, he didn't just claim a title, he made it his mission to own it. Over the next 6 years, he didn't simply hold on to the belt, he redefined what it meant to be a champion. 15 challengers stepped into the ring hoping to catch him slipping. 15 challengers left defeated. Tito wasn't coasting through easy wins, he was carving a legacy. He didn't fight like someone guarding a crown. He fought like someone determined to prove, every time, that it still belonged to him. Some of those challengers came with real weight behind their names. Yori Boy Campus, undefeated and dangerous, entered the ring with knockout intentions and the kind of power that demanded respect. But Tito wasn't impressed. He dropped Campus 3 times and stopped him in the 4th round. It didn't stop there. Next came Obakar, a slick mover with a sharp jab and enough footwork to give any fighter trouble. Still, Trinidad broke through. He knocked Carr down 3 times too. These weren't lucky moments. They were warnings. Tito didn't just beat opponents, he broke them. When he walked forward, backing up wasn't a tactic, it was survival. And even that didn't always save you. What made Tito special during this run wasn't just the number of wins, it was how steady and deliberate he was. Every fight followed a rhythm. He used the early rounds to study his opponent, watching closely, adjusting his pace, and then gradually turning up the pressure. His jab wasn't just a rangefinder, it landed with weight. His left hook, sharp and sudden, could end a fight in seconds. But what really set him apart was his balance. Even in the middle of a brawl, Tito looked steady, his movements clean and composed. It didn't stop there. 1999 came with 2 defining fights. The first was against Pernell Whitaker, a former pound-for-pound king, and one of the best defensive boxers the sport had ever seen. Whitaker was a puzzle, the kind of fighter who made opponents look foolish as they swung at air. But Trinidad didn't fall into the trap. He stuck to his plan, stayed calm, and landed enough clean shots to win a clear decision. No one had ever beaten Whitaker like that before. It wasn't just impressive, it changed the conversation. Tito wasn't just beating champions, he was beginning to dismantle legends. However, it was the Oscar De La Hoya fight that drew the biggest spotlight. Two undefeated champions stood across from each other, backed by fan bases overflowing with pride and anticipation. From the first bell, the bout unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Oscar used his footwork and jab to keep Trinidad at bay, picking his moments and frustrating Tito's rhythm. For most of the fight, De La Hoya seemed in control, but in the final rounds, convinced he had done enough, Oscar backed off. He circled the ring and stopped throwing with intent. Tito wasn't backing down, he kept pressing forward. When the final bell rang, the scorecards leaned in Trinidad's favor. Some called the result controversial. Others blamed Oscar for letting it slip. Either way, the belts were unified, and Tito walked away with the biggest win of his career. Tito moved up to light middleweight and wasted no time making his presence felt. His first opponent was David Reed, an Olympic gold medalist with a fast jab and solid movement. But Tito broke him down round by round, dropping him 4 times before securing a clear decision win. Next is Fernando Vargas, another young, undefeated star. Their fight turned into one of the most brutal wars of Tito's career. Both fighters were knocked down. Both were worn out. But only one had enough left to finish strong. In the 12th round, Tito let his hands go with a furious final attack, stopping Vargas and proving once again why he was one of boxing's most dangerous finishers. Later that same year, he moved up to middleweight and overpowered William Joppy with the same speed, power, and control. 3 weight divisions, 3 world titles, and still the same fierce, fearless Trinidad. As Trinidad rose through the ranks, every win did more than protect his title. It sent a message that he wasn't slowing down. Now, let's go back to where it all began. To understand why Felix Trinidad's word still matters, you have to know who he was before the fame, before the titles, and before the world called him Tito. Felix Juan Trinidad Garcia, born on January 10, 1973, was never just a boxer. He was a proud symbol of Puerto Rico, stepping into the ring with leather gloves and the hopes of an island behind him. He grew up in the small city of Fajardo, far from fame, in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. Life there was simple but steady, shaped by the values his father taught him. Show respect, work hard, and believe in yourself even when no one is watching. His father, Felix Trinidad Sr., knew what it meant to fight. He had been a professional boxer himself. But more than passing down technique, he believed boxing could shape a young boy into something greater than just a fighter. He became Tito's trainer, mentor, and biggest supporter. Their bond ran deeper than strategy. The gym became their second home, and every punch carried a purpose, a shared promise that they would rise together. By the time Tito was a teenager, it was clear he wasn't just another kid learning how to throw jabs. His footwork, balance, and especially his timing set him apart from the other amateurs. With 51 wins and 5 national titles in Puerto Rico, his amateur record spoke for itself. But what stood out even more was how he carried himself. He wasn't dramatic and chaotic like most boxers. He smiled easily, spoke softly, and thanked everyone in the room after a win. His pro debut came at just 17, an age when most kids are still learning to drive or dreaming about college. Tito skipped all of that and went straight for the fight. His first professional fight ended in a knockout, a clear statement that something special had arrived. By the time he turned 18, the spark had grown into real buzz. He wasn't just knocking opponents out, he was doing it with style. Smooth, punishing left hooks, calm under pressure, and the same easy grin in post-fight interviews that made him almost impossible to dislike. June 19, 1993, wasn't just another date. It was the night 20 years old. Tito stepped into the ring against Maurice Blocker for the IBF Welterweight Championship. Blocker was no stepping stone. He was a seasoned, respected champion. But the moment Tito landed that signature left hook, everything changed. In under 2 rounds, Trinidad claimed his first world title. Just like that, Puerto Rico had a new king, and the boxing world couldn't help but notice. However, it wasn't just the win that captured people's hearts. It was the way he won. Decisive, disciplined, and without arrogance. Puerto Ricans everywhere celebrated as if the island had won gold. Radios played victory songs, newspapers ran his name for days, and strangers embraced in the streets. Tito hadn't just won a title, he had lifted a nation. And despite the fame, he didn't change. He trained with the same hunger, lived simply, and stayed humble. What changed was how people saw him. He became more than a champion. He became a symbol. But real legacy isn't built on titles alone. It is tested. So when a man like Tito talks about the toughest boxer he ever faced, it comes from real experience, from pain, from lessons that changed him. And when he finally answered, it surprised a lot of people. With so many great opponents in his past, picking just one sounds impossible. But Trinidad did not hesitate. He knew exactly who tested him the most. So who was it? The toughest boxer he boxed. Long before that night at Madison Square Garden, there was another fight. It did not go down as a loss on the record, but in many ways, it tested Trinidad more than any other. Ask the people who truly understand the sport. Former trainers, respected analysts, even fighters who shared the ring with Tito. One name keeps coming up. You might expect to hear De La Hoya, Hopkins, or maybe even Mike Tyson. But the name that surprises many is Fernando Vargas. He was not the most decorated fighter Tito ever faced, but he may have pushed him the hardest. This was more than a title fight. It was a clash of willpower, and Vargas came in determined to show he belonged. The bout took place in December 2000. Tito was on top of the world, a 3-division world champion who had silenced every critic as he moved up in weight. Vargas, just 22 at the time, was still climbing, but he carried himself with a kind of fire that made people take notice. He wasn't there to collect a paycheck. He came to win, to drag Tito into a kind of fight that had no blueprint, one that would demand more than just skill or power. In round 1, it looked like Vargas had bitten off more than he could chew. Tito came out aggressive and sharp, dropping Vargas twice before the bell. The crowd roared. Commentators began talking about an early night. But Vargas didn't fold. He got up, reset, and by round 4, he answered back. A perfectly timed counter dropped Tito to the canvas. It stunned the crowd and reset the energy in the arena. From that moment on, it was no longer just a title defense. It was survival. What followed was anything but clean. It was rough, physical, and punishing. Vargas came forward with heavy body shots, clinching often and pushing the edge of the rules. Low blows were exchanged, heads collided. The referee had trouble keeping control, but Tito stayed composed. He kept his rhythm, adjusted his angles, and relied on the same power and patience that had carried him through past battles. Each round became a back-and-forth exchange. One fighter would land clean, and the other would answer right back. Neither man backed down. Vargas crowded Tito against the ropes, trying to wear him down. Tito responded with sharp combinations that forced Vargas to reset. At times, it looked like neither could absorb another clean shot. But they kept coming. By round 12, both men were drained, their faces swollen, each punch slower than the last. With less than a minute to go, Tito broke through. He dropped Vargas 3 times. The third knockdown was enough. The referee stepped in and waved it off. Tito won, but it wasn't the kind of victory he usually celebrated. He didn't smile for the cameras. He didn't raise his hands or soak in the moment. He looked drained, as if the fight had taken more out of him than anyone expected. In the days that followed, those close to him noticed a change. His training slowed. His recovery took longer. The damage Vargas dealt didn't cost him a title, but it left a mark. Not one you could see, but one that stayed with him. This is why Vargas is named as Tito's toughest opponent. It was not about belts or headlines. It was about how deep a fighter had to go to win. Vargas never stopped pressing forward, and Felix Trinidad, for all his skill and power, had to reach further than ever before just to make it to the final bell. Now that the spotlight is fading, one question remains. What did Felix Trinidad really leave behind? Was it the titles, the knockouts, or something even more lasting? When it comes to accomplishments, Tito's record speaks for itself. He finished his career with 42 wins, 3 losses, and 35 knockouts. He became a world champion in 3 different weight classes: welterweight, junior middleweight, and middleweight. At just 20 years old, he stopped Maurice Blocker in the 2nd round to win the IBF welterweight title, starting a reign that lasted through most of the 1990s. He defended that title 15 times, setting a division record that still stands. But what made Tito's run unforgettable wasn't just the wins. It was how he won with power, pride, and with an entire island behind him. Puerto Rico didn't just watch his fights, they lived them. His name wasn't just on posters, it was etched into the hearts of fans who saw him as more than a champion. It didn't end there. In the year 2000, the Ring magazine named Trinidad Fighter of the Year. That same year, he was ranked among the top pound-for-pound boxers in the world, alongside legends like Roy Jones Jr., Shane Mosley, and Bernard Hopkins. These weren't just casual recognitions. They were confirmations of what fans had long believed, that Tito had earned his place among the legends of the sport. Felix Trinidad's fights were shown in more than 70 countries. His name appeared in movie scripts, sports documentaries, and boxing specials. He never acted in a major movie, but his influence was everywhere. You could find him on posters, in highlight reels, and across boxing video archives. This image of him, with his gloves raised, draped in the Puerto Rican flag, became a lasting symbol of pride and victory for an entire generation. In 2014, Tito was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, an honor many believed was long overdue. After hanging up his gloves, he quietly stepped away from the spotlight. He returned to Puerto Rico, choosing a life rooted in family and the same community that had supported him from the start. He rarely grants interviews, but when he does, his humility still comes through, just as it did in the ring. Over the years, he has been invited to present championship belts, attend state dinners, and speak at youth boxing programs. He has also devoted time to charity work, supporting hospitals and schools across the island. In doing so, Felix Trinidad continues to give back to the very people who stood by him during his most unforgettable fights. For many, Felix Trinidad stands for more than just boxing. He represents a time when a fighter's word meant something, and when getting up after a knockdown said more than any title. His career may be over, but his story still inspires. He remains a lasting symbol of pride, not just for Puerto Rico, but for boxing fans everywhere. So now, with time separating us from his prime, what truly made Felix Trinidad unforgettable? Was it his power, his titles, or was it the way he made people feel? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out other videos on our channel.